We're going to dive deep into this piece called On Intentions in Creativity. It's from April 8th, 2021, and it really digs into the heart of what drives art and how we, as viewers, listeners, consumers, experience it.
That's right. This piece really gets you thinking about how things have changed, especially in the art world. The author lays out this really interesting perspective on how what artists focus on and what audiences expect from art, how those things seem to have shifted over time.
Right, and I think that's what we're going to try to unpack today. I mean, what are those shifts? What role does the artist's intention play in all of this?
Yeah.
And ultimately, what does it mean for us, for how we engage with all the art and media that surrounds us? Like, does it even matter?
Yeah, I think those are some really important questions, and this piece gives us a lot to chew on.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Right off the bat, the author points out this pretty noticeable shift in what seems to be valued in the art world. You know, they compare the art scene of the 1960s, where knowing all the layers, like the subtext and knowledge woven into a piece, was really important, to today. And the author just comes right out and says, it's not important now to have subtext or context. It makes you stop and wonder, what's been lost? What have we gained?
It's a bold statement for sure, and it really makes you question how we approach art now. It's like back then, artists might have intentionally embedded all these layers of meaning, inviting the viewer to really dig deep and interpret things. But now, a lot of that background, that context, it's just not there. It's almost like we're not expected to engage as deeply anymore.
Yeah, I see that. It's like when you're looking at a piece of art today, are you missing something? Or is what you see really all there is? Like, did the artist even intend for there to be more?
Right, and I think that's a question a lot of people are grappling with these days.
And the author, they use a really familiar example to illustrate this point, pop music. They argue that part of pop music's success is that, quote, it's constantly leaving out parts of the music. So basically they're saying you don't need to be a music theory expert, you know, scales and chords and all that, to enjoy a catchy pop song. It's all about that instant connection, the hook. It's not about the complexity or I guess maybe even the artistry in the traditional sense.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because the author's suggesting that this trend of leaving things out, not demanding a deeper level of knowledge or understanding, it's not limited to music. It's happening all over in how we create and consume different kinds of media. And it begs the question, are we becoming more and more comfortable with, maybe even preferring, experiences that don't require us to look beneath the surface?
That is interesting. It makes you wonder if that's a good thing, right? And this is where it gets really, really fascinating. The author goes on to talk about the potential impact of all this cutting, as they call it, on society as a whole. Like, they're worried it might be rewiring our brains on a societal level by millions of tiny cuts, cutting into everything. And they even use this really vivid analogy of how we sometimes mistake historical cutting and scarring for actual healing.
Yeah, that analogy really makes you think, because it suggests that maybe we're just putting a Band-Aid on things instead of truly understanding and addressing the complexities. It's like we're losing our ability to appreciate nuance and depth.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit here. The author then talks about the role of the artist, and they make this really interesting observation about a generational shift in how art is created. They argue that baby boomers and earlier generations, they were all about that individual creative process. But now, with millennials and the younger Gen Xers, there's a lot more emphasis on social creation, group projects, you know, that kind of thing. Have you noticed that at all?
I have, yeah. It's like this whole idea of the solitary artist toiling away in their studio is evolving. And the author actually talks about how much they personally value that individual exploration and the process of comparing your work with others who are exploring similar ideas. That's how they see artistic movements forming organically, from people wrestling with similar thoughts and creating similar artworks, as they put it.
Right, like kindred spirits finding each other through their art.
Exactly. But then the author raises this really interesting challenge. They say that it's becoming harder for these genuine artistic movements to form today because there's a lack of definition to the artistic processes and a lack of what they call codification. It's like everyone's working with such different approaches without any shared language or understanding that it's hard to find common ground.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a house without a blueprint, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if there's no common framework or dialogue around the fundamentals of art making, how can you build those connections, that shared sense of purpose that really defines a movement? It's definitely something to think about.
So now let's take a detour into the digital world. The author spends some time discussing digital art on the blockchain. And they make this really strong point that the lasting value of digital art has to be tied to its aesthetics, not just the administrative work of blockchain transactions. Now, for anyone who's not super familiar with this stuff, the blockchain is basically a digital ledger that keeps track of who owns what. So the author is saying that just because something exists on the blockchain doesn't automatically make it good art. The art itself still needs to be good, right?
Exactly. They're challenging this idea that a token or record on the blockchain is enough to make something valuable as art. The true value, they argue, has to lie in the art itself. Its visual impact, its conceptual depth, the way it makes you feel.
And then they drop this really interesting line. Administrative work has become art. It's almost like they're being a bit ironic, don't you think? Like the act of creating, minting, and tracking digital art, that whole process has become this focal point, sometimes even more important than the artwork itself. It's a weird inversion.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder if we're focusing on the wrong things.
Okay, so then the author brings in some of their personal experiences with what they call rectilinear creativity. They have this thing called the hash heart, which is based on these systematic, almost rule-based creative processes. And they contrast this with their music, which they describe as more curvilinear and figurative. Think of rectilinear as this structured, step-by-step approach, almost like following a set of instructions. Their hash heart is determined by a predefined system, whereas their music flows more organically.
It sounds like they're experimenting with two very different modes of creating. And I think this is really key to understanding their overall point. They're showing us that with this rectilinear work, it's not about showing all the information or even having that much information to begin with. It can just be anything, even an empty gallery, they say. The emphasis shifts from the traditional art object to the underlying concept, the system, or maybe even the act of presenting it.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical idea when you think about it. So let's talk about intentions. The author is adamant that pure intentions are still vital in art. But they're worried about the allure from the internet, skewing those intentions, making artists focus more on seeking attention and validation online. And it makes you wonder how much of what we see online is driven by a desire for likes and shares rather than a genuine artistic vision.
It's such a crucial question in our hyper-connected world, right? Like that constant feedback loop of likes and comments, it can be a powerful force. And the author is highlighting this potential conflict between truly wanting to create and just wanting to be seen and validated online.
Right. And that brings us to this really fascinating distinction the author makes between two types of free will. First, there's what they call real free will, which is that inner drive to create, regardless of whether anyone else notices or cares. It's about that joy of creation, seizing the moment and doing it because you love it.
So it's not about external validation, it's about the internal satisfaction of creating.
Exactly. But then there's what they call black box free will, and this one comes from a different place. It's driven by those deeper needs we all have, like the need for attention, love, acceptance. It's about filling a void, in a way.
It's a really interesting way to think about what motivates us, not just in art, but in life too.
Right. So, to help us visualize this whole thing, the author uses a box metaphor. We have the white box, which represents a kind of collaboration with the universe, where ideas flow freely and effortlessly. Then there's the black box, where you feel like the universe is controlling you, maybe even manipulating you to act on those deeper needs we were just talking about. And finally, there's the gray box, which sits somewhere in between.
I like that. It's like a spectrum, right? Of
Yeah.
varying degrees of control and influence. The white box is about that harmonious flow. The black box is about being driven by forces outside yourself. And the gray box is this more ambiguous middle ground.
Yeah, exactly. And the author actually expresses some concern that all these shades of gray might be confusing, making people choose between the white box and the black box like it's a binary choice. And they're very clear about their own preference for avoiding that black box, for staying true to that real free will we talked about.
That preference really speaks to their belief in the importance of conscious intention, really owning your creative choices and not just being driven by those external forces.
And then finally, they introduce this idea of the red box. Now, the red box is like a synthesis, a blend of the black and the white, but with something else added in. And in this case, red represents personal free will, the ability to navigate that whole spectrum of light and dark, from complete external control to complete surrender to the universe.
So it's about taking charge, consciously choosing where you want to be on that spectrum.
Right. It's like you're not just reacting to those external forces or passively letting the universe guide you. You're actively shaping your own path. And I thought it was interesting that they chose red after black and white because they said it just made sense logically, like the next step in a color progression.
It definitely adds another layer to this idea of consciously choosing your own way.
So, as we wrap up, let's just recap some of the key points here. The author really highlighted these fascinating contrasts, like the apparent shift from needing deep context in art to an acceptance of just taking things at face value, the move from individual creation to more social and collaborative art making, and that really thought-provoking distinction between those two types of free will that drive artistic intention.
And at the heart of it all is this question: what happens to art and our relationship with it when we stop looking for deeper meaning and we downplay the importance of that individual, intrinsically motivated artistic vision? It's a question that all of us, both creators and consumers of art, need to grapple with.
I completely agree. And it leaves you, our listener, with this to consider. How might those different kinds of free will influence how you create art and media and how you consume it? How might the presence or absence of that deeper context shape your experience? It's definitely something worth pondering. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.